Hello, everybody. My name is Joe DePalo. I'm the Chief Platform Officer for Netskope. First, I want to thank you for joining me on this SASE Week topic. I'm going to go through a few things that I think will be very helpful as you go through the cloud vendor selection process. There's a lot of marketing, there's a lot of messaging, there's a lot of information out there. And I've been operating cloud providers, CDNs, network solutions for close to 30 years. I've seen all aspects of these vendors and solutions. I bought a lot of solutions. And so I think I can help you with some perspective. I'm going to provide you with some questions, some content. I think they'll help you in your journey of the SASE solution. So the first thing you want to know as you're working with a vendor is, are they working with a public cloud or did they try to build it themselves? And so a public cloud is going to have limitations. It's going to be someone else's infrastructure, someone else's network. And there are challenges there that you probably need to understand and maybe take for granted. If they're building a private network, there's going to be a lot more flexibility for the vendor. But again, there are questions you should know. And so as you're going through the selection process, the first thing you need to know is, are they on a public cloud or are they on a private cloud, and how are they managing that infrastructure? So what I'm going to help you with is I'm going to cover each of those options, and I'm going to dive into the specifics that would add value to the process for you, and that will help you make the selection process much easier. So the first area you want to focus on are servers. And so whether it's a network service or whether it's a security service, there are always servers involved. And the location of those servers is important. And so if they're using a public cloud, they're going to be in regions. And so the public clouds have a few dozen regions. And so you want to understand, are they configured on every region? Are they on a subset of that region? Public cloud providers have very few edge services. And so you want to be aware if they're on edge services. Typically with a public cloud solution, there's going to be a latency issue. There's a lot of backhaul. There's some routing issues there with cold potato routing. And so if the provider is using a public cloud, server location is important because you might only be in a few regions because it's cheaper. And then you're thinking they're using a large hyperscaler, and the reality is they're using a small subset, and therefore the service will suffer. And if it's a private infrastructure, it's important to understand where the servers are as well, because there's a lot of regions to cover. Again, latency is a problem. And so maybe they're cutting corners. Maybe they're backhauling. Maybe they're using virtual locations and making you believe they're somewhere they're not. And so having a validation of where your users are, where you're going to consume the services, and where those servers are located is a very important step in this process. And so as you're going through the selection process of a vendor, make sure you understand server location and make sure you understand, are they real or virtual? And you want to understand that distance between the server location and your users. So after the servers, you want to work on the network, right? So who controls the network? If it's a public cloud provider, the public cloud is managing that network, right? My experience firsthand, I've managed a public cloud network, and there's very different priorities about the traffic, right? Cold potato routing, there's very little backhaul. Because the services are in a local, centralized location, the network becomes a different use case for that. And so the network location is important. Does the underlying provider, whether it's a private provider, do they peer with SASE providers? Do they peer with public clouds? Do they peer with content that you care about? Do they peer with ISPs? What kind of interconnection do they have? What kind of link sizes? And so generally when you go through it as the underlying provider, the network is usually something that is ignored. And so even though you're maybe buying a network service or a cloud service, the underlying network and how it's interconnected, who manages it, the backhaul link sizes, the long haul, these are all things that are taken for granted. And as security and network merge together, the network management is something we need to be aware of. And so many solutions in the SASE space rely on someone else to manage their network for them. And as a customer of that firsthand experience, you might be at a loss from control, visibility, the stability under that, and they'll blame somebody else. And so when you're buying a SASE solution, you want to have as much visibility and control with the vendor to manage those underlying infrastructure and manage that network link. So now you know where the servers are, you understand how the network is connected, and so what services are running on those servers. And so even though they have servers, many of the vendors have been around a long time. Do they have 10-year-old servers that can't handle the services? Again, are they running those virtual services? And so if it's a public cloud, we know they're going to be in regions. And so understanding the service that you use and where it's located on which server is important. Does the server run all the services? Is there a main brain? Is there a phone home? Data locality, this is important. It's important for a lot of other areas. And so the user experience is key to understanding, is the server close to them? Does it have rich network connectivity? And is the service running in a local location? And so this is another area where they take it for granted. They're going to tell you they have 100 locations or 50 locations, but it's not the locations that matter. Is it a real POP? Is it interconnected? And does it run all the services that you need to purchase? The next section is based on capacity management. And a lot of vendors are going to be uncomfortable with sharing, but it's okay to ask those questions, right? Is there available capacity? Do they add capacity just in time? What is their scaling metrics? This is something that companies that maybe have financial issues or companies that are growing too fast, they're going to run out of capacity. And so they should be able to share transparently with you their scaling metrics. They should be able to share with you when they upgrade servers, when they upgrade their network links. If they're using a public cloud, their mix of reserved instances versus on-demand instances is very important, because if they're trying to hit some cost model or they're trying to hit some usage model, you're going to run into capacity issues. And so we've seen firsthand vendors in the space that are trying to use the public cloud. They have limitations with network and edge services, but then they also have these cost constraints that they're trying to manage. And so another part of that is if they're running a private infrastructure, how many sites have they added? This is a good sense. Most companies will tell you how fast they're growing. Most companies will tell you at their the success they're having, but how fast are they adding locations? How fast are they adding servers? And so it's okay to ask them for scaling metrics. It's okay to ask them about their available capacity. It's okay to ask them about their past expansion. And so if you're evaluating a SASE solution, it's good to know and how they're going to manage the growth, especially if it's a private infrastructure. How they manage that capacity, how they manage their cost model is okay to ask them and to press on it. So as you're understanding the capacity model, you also have to understand that things are going to break. And so how does the vendor manage things on breakage? And so what is the second closest site to your primary? What is the third site? What is the fourth site? Right? How are they managing failover? And that's important if you consider their scaling metric and you consider their performance. The failover scenario is something that needs to be managed automatic, proactive. Do they have server proactive failover? Do they have user-based failover? And so breakage is something that you should plan for. Every vendor is going to claim to have the best SLA and the best uptime, but services always break. And so understanding the failover, the load balancing mechanism, again, location of those servers. Is a server good for one, but if it fails, is it 100 milliseconds away? And so understanding the second and third option from a cloud solution is very important, especially a public cloud, because if there's a problem with the DDoS or there's a problem with one region, the other regions are pretty far away. And so understanding failover, load balancing, incident management is very important to picking a SASE vendor. The next section is focused on performance validation. And so most SASE vendors will claim to have low latency or claim to have performance, but as we've learned about the server location and service location and network management and capacity constraints, performance is something that is going to be, you should be concerned about and going to be something that is tested. And so they should be able to provide you latency management, but also is the latency integrated into product functionality? Is it integrated into steering? And so just because they're aware of their performance doesn't necessarily mean their traffic engineering, their load balancing takes performance and latency into account. And so understanding the proximity of the service, understanding the server location, understanding network management will allow you to have more information based on the performance, but also you should hold that vendor accountable to provide you those specifics, provide you those numbers, and does the SASE product solution, does it actually take into account real-time performance, user experience, user performance? Are they using synthetic data? Are they using synthetic probes? Are they using third-party validation? And so every SASE service should be able to validate their performance to their customers, but also operate that so there's triangulation between the actual performance and the user experience. So the last area, which is probably the most important, is how do you pay them? And so most vendors have, if they're public cloud or private cloud, are going to want to cover their costs. And if they're in expensive regions, if they're a fast-growing company, there are costs that they have to manage. And so are they sticking you with that bill? Are there surcharges? Are there different maps and footprints? You get to use all the services for one fee. Are there burstable charges? And so I've had a lot of customers that have been invoiced by a vendor with one, but then there's a true up of services and things they don't understand. So even if it's not on the quote, it might be in the MSA. It may be something that they spring on you later. So understanding what you're buying and what you're paying for, and that vendor should be able to show you before you sign that agreement what that solution is. So if you're able to validate the servers, the network, the services, the performance, the capacity, and the bills, then you'll have a good SASE solution. So thank you for your time. If I can provide any value or you want to ask me any questions, please reach out. We can do a network assessment, which helps you understand this process, or we have a questionnaire that you can use for selecting vendors as well. And so if you need anything, let me know. And I want to thank you again for your time and enjoy SASE Week. Thanks again.